Good morning. Oh, and welcome to the UU Church of Tucson, Arizona. It's exciting to see all of you here in Holland, and welcome to all of you watching us from afar. It's now August 14th, just so because lots of people don't watch it when it actually gets recorded. Anyway, I'm excited to be here. My name is Bert Meek. I'm the worship associate for this morning. This morning we have two guest speakers. We have Natasha Warner and Heidi Harley. Both of them are longtime members of our church. They also are professors of linguistics at the University of Arizona, which many of you have probably heard of. Heidi works with the Yaqui language teachers to document and analyze, to analyze the Yaqui language, which is spoken in Arizona, in Sonora, Mexico, and also, of course, here in Tucson. Natasha works with the Mutsun and the Tamien communities in California to help revitalize their reawakening language heritage, working from early documents. Both have taught language and social justice issues in the U of A, which will tie in to what you're going to hear about later this morning. Please, let's give them both a welcome. They've watched our services from home, and it's a step of trust in us and trust in our commitment to safety that they're here in person, so it does my heart well. Our church community continuously strives to become as varied as the blooms on the Sonora Desert, as we try to better reflect the wonderful diversity with which Southern Arizona is blessed. So in whatever way you participate in our service today, we welcome you. For those watching us from afar, wherever or whenever you share in this service, we welcome you. Whatever the cultural or the ethnic background that you claim, remember you are welcome here. Whomever you love, however you identify your gender, and however you choose to express it, we welcome you. Wherever you are in your life's journey and your spiritual path, always remember you are welcome here. Now, UUCT is a covenantal community. What that means is we make a commitment to one another about how we interact and treat one another. In these times of pandemic, wearing masks, practicing social distancing as best as we can, and getting vaccinated are all part of our covenant to one another. These practices are especially important as our way of showing compassion to those most vulnerable in our congregation, the youngest, and those that are immunocompromised. So if you're attending worship today in person, we hope and expect that you are fully vaccinated and boosted, unless you have a medical exemption from your doctor. Now, if you're unwilling to be vaccinated, that's certainly your decision, vaccinated against COVID-19, then please join in our services remotely, where it's safe for you and safe for all of us. Because now the website covidactnow.org indicates that the community risk level for Pima County has dropped to low, this allows us to sing through masks. So there are going to be two hymns this morning, and you can sing your heart out through your mask. I want to extend a special welcome to any visitors here today or watching remotely, and I ask you please fill out a guest information card, which Mary Weiss will post on the YouTube chat. I see her going over there right now. And for those of you who are here in person, please come to the welcome table, which is in Goddard Hall, just across the patio. There's a yellow guest information sheet that you can fill out if you would consider that. So today, we are fortunate to have the gifted pianist Hangwoo Bai. She's a grad student at the U of A, and you will be seeing more of her in weeks to come. So please share with us the prelude for this morning. Hangwoo. That was beautiful. Thank you, Hung Yu. I want to remind everybody that our settled minister, Reverend Bethany Russell Lowe, will be with us back in 2 more weeks. So, to the next, for Call to Worship. This was written by Erica Hewitt, entitled Put Away the Pressures of the World. As we enter now into worship, put away the pressures of the world and that ask us to perform, to take up masks, and to put on brave fronts. Silence those voices that ask us to be perfect. This is a community of compassion and welcoming. You do not have to do anything to earn the love contained within these walls. You do not have to be braver, smarter, stronger, better than you are this very moment in order to belong here with all of us. You only have to bring the gift of your body, no matter how able, your seeking mind, no matter how busy, your animal heart, no matter how broken. Bring all that you are and all that you love to this hour together. Let us worship now. It's now time to prepare to light the chalice. If you would read these words by Eric Walter Wixom with me. Here today, in this place, with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know. May we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice that we light our way. All of you at home, if you have a chalice or a candle, please light that as we light our chalice here in Holland. Build a little suspense, and off it goes. Thank you.
I am so pleased to be able to invite you to rise as you are able, and join in singing as you choose, or humming, or moving, or shaking, or whatever feels best to you. But please, may we make a noise in response. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There's more hope. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There are more voices somewhere. There are more voices somewhere. There are more voices somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There are more voices somewhere.
Stolen words. written by Melanie Florence and Gabrielle Grimard. The translation of stolen words was done by Plains Creek language speakers Dolores Sand and Gail Weenie. She came home from school today, skipping and dancing, humming a song under her breath. Clutching a dream catcher she had made from odds and ends, bits of string, plastic beads, and brightly colored feathers. Her glassy braids danced against her shoulders, swaying with her, black as raven's wing. "Grandpa," she asked, clutching his hand, spinning under his arm before dropping it again, "how do you say grandfather in Cree?" He stopped breathing for a moment, a lifetime to a 7-year-old. He looked down at her sadly. "I don't remember," he answered. "I lost my words a long time ago." A frown clouded her face. "How do you lose words, Grandpa?" she asked. "They took them away," he answered. She thought for a moment. "Where did they take them?" she asked. "Where they took all of us," he said. "Away from home, away from laughter and soft words, away from our mothers who cried for us." She reached for his gnarled hands. "Who took you away, Grandpa?" she asked quietly. "Men and women dressed in black," he said, "talking to us with words we did not know," he answered. They reached home and sat together on the stairs. "Where did they take you, Grandpa?" she asked. "Away to a school that was cold and lonely, where angry white faces raised their voices and their hands when we used our words," he answered. "They took our words and locked them away, punished us until we forgot them, until we sounded like them." Harsh, sharp words, so different from the sound of our beautiful ones. She touched his weathered face, tried to wipe the sadness away with her soft hands. She looked down at her lap and handed him the dream catcher she had made for her room. "You take this, Grandpa," she said. "Maybe it will help you find your words again." He smiled at her, his granddaughter. He touched her innocent face, a face that had never known hard words or raised hands. He smiled and kissed her head. The next day, she skipped out of school again, smiling widely at her grandfather. She stopped in front of him and took a deep breath. His eyes widened. She smiled brighter than the sun. "I found your words, Grandpa," she said. She pulled a tattered, well-worn paperback out of her book bag. "Introduction to Cree," it said. "My teacher helped me find this for you at the library." He reached for it, his hands shaking, opened it, feeling the soft, much-loved pages under his fingers. Granddaughter. The word felt familiar in his mouth. It felt like home, his mother. He turned the pages of the book carefully. Book. He turned another, word after a word. Language. His word, pages and pages of them. He looked at his granddaughter. "Thank you, Tinny." "Will you read to me?" she asked, taking his hand in hers and leading him home. "Will you teach me your words?" His heart danced as he nodded, holding the book against his chest.
Such a beautiful story. It's time now for our offering. However you have participated in today's service, our congregation depends on your financial support. For those of you here in person, on your right as you entered the doors And now in the back of the sanctuary, folks will be holding the baskets, the collection baskets. You can put your donation in there now during the offering if you wish, or as you leave at the end of this morning's service. For those of you watching us from afar, you can send a check to our church office. You can give online at uuct.org/donate, or you can text at this number you see up above over there, 833-361-5796. Please remember that we have been warmed by fires which we did not build. We have drunk at wells which we did not dig. And our church remains vibrant because of your gifts of love, of time, and of treasure. Thank you, thank you. It's time now for our ritual of joys and sorrows. Remember that all of us carry both joy and sadness inside, These emotions may not be obvious to those around us, but they are very real and very present for us. Each of us needs a time and a place to honor these feelings. Today, remember that our earth is strong. It can hold our pain and our joy and our love and our anger. The shared bowl over here, which we use for this ceremony, this ritual each week, is strong enough for the big rocks that are inside now, which signify our collective celebrations and mournings. It will also hold the smaller stones that you add to represent your individual joys and sorrows. For me personally, I am rejuvenated when I watch the Riito flowing silver in the pre-dawn light. And I celebrate the fact that our legislature, our government, has finally made a first significant step to begin to address the climate crisis that all of us face. We here in the desert know that water is a life-sustaining and a very scarce and increasingly scarce resource. Let us remember that those who walk through the desert right now without access for water. So we pour water from our jug, a plastic jug similar to those used by our partner No More Deaths. For those of you who wish to share this morning your joy or sorrow with us online, please go to menti.com and enter the code you see, 4208-9773. For those of you here in the sanctuary that wish to send your own thoughts to Menti, Brian Moon will be able to pick them up and then put them on the website there. And if you're here in person and you have a joy or sorrow in your heart, you are welcome to come up while Hongyu plays up on the table to put a stone in the water. So, those who've responded online, I am praying for my niece and my great niece, who are both battling brain cancer. Gratitude to worship associates and to volunteers participating in worship today so that others can vacation and join us from afar. Very nice. The women in Afghanistan who are being brutalized by the Taliban, my sorrow. My joy is that I'm spiritually conscious and actively seeking spiritual growth. Time to enjoy the cool mornings, do the work that I enjoy, and visit with friends and family. Joy for the rain in the desert and for new adventures. Is that it? I place these stones in the bowl for all those joys and all those sorrows that have gone unspoken.
Our prayer today is by Michael Krauss, who is an academic and wrote in an academic paper about language endangerment. Speaking of the sacredness of things, I honestly believe, as a linguist who is supposed to view languages as objects of scientific study, that somehow or other they elude us, because every language has its own divine spark of life.
I'll now read a poem by another professor at the U of A, Ophelia Zepeda, whom we are hoping to bring to this podium sometime in the near future. It's entitled, Walking with Language. Some have carried it, held close and protected. Others have had to pull it along like a reluctant child. Still others have waved it like a flag, a signal to others. And some have filled it with rage and dare others to come close. And then there are those who find their language a burdensome shackle, and they continually pick at the lock.
Hello. Did you know that just by virtue of hearing me speak that word, you are already forming conclusions about where I'm from, what my educational level is, whether I'm trustworthy or not? Linguists have shown that language is pretty much the most powerful identity signal that we have. In a study, they showed that just on hearing the word hello, different individuals will consistently rate the speaker of that word on personality traits like trustworthiness or dominance. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, this slide, yes. Americans can distinguish between different dialects of English spoken in the United States quite reliably, based just on the word hello. I will play 3 stimuli for you, or rather our incredible tech team will play 3 stimuli for you of just the word hello that were used in a brain imaging study that showed that people's brains reacted differently to the 3 different stimuli, showing that they distinguished them. Play the first 3, please.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
One of those tokens was African American English, one was Hispanic English, and one was mainstream American English. And with about 70% accuracy, subjects in this study could distinguish which was which. These tokens were taken from longer sentences, so if you felt like you couldn't identify which was which, just on the basis of the first single word, we're going to play the 3 sentences from which they were excerpted for you. 10 words you will know by the end of each sentence. Could you please play the next 3?
Hello. I'm calling about the apartment you have advertised in the paper. Hello. I'm calling about the apartment you have advertised in the paper. Hello, I'm calling about the apartment you have advertised in the paper.
So just on the basis of that extremely short speech sample, people can evaluate someone's ethnicity, race, educational background, all kinds of information is extracted. This process is automatic, involuntary. You can't not do it. It's part of what language does for people. Now, next slide, please. In life and death situations, for thousands of years, people have used single tokens to identify friend from foe and often have, take significant action. So we have a word for these tokens it's shibboleth, which is in fact the token of Hebrew that Gileadites used to tell friend Gileadites from foe Ephraimites. The Gileadites used the sh sound, shibboleth. The Ephraimites used the s sound, sibboleth. And if you said sibboleth, bad things happened. In 1282, Italians used this word cicera to distinguish between friend Italians, or Sicilians in fact, and foe French. The French would say shishira. In World War II, the Dutch would use this place name, which I will not attempt to pronounce, but Natasha can.
Scheveningen.
To distinguish friend Dutch from foe Germans, who would use a sh instead of the sequence. In World War II, similarly, Americans had strange soldiers pronounce Chrysler, among other words, to distinguish American speakers from their foes. And it's being used, these shibboleth techniques are being used right now in Ukraine to distinguish Ukrainians from Russians. There's a particular kind of Ukrainian bread loaf, which is depicted in this Ukrainian postage stamp, which is called palanitsia, or something similar to that. And Ukrainian soldiers are asking strange soldiers to pronounce this word. And I have a video for you that shows this actually happening in 2022. Could you please play the video?
Слава Україні!
Are you Ukrainian? No, keep going. Sorry. I just forgot to say. First he asks, are you Ukrainian? The soldier says something back, and then...
Слава Україні! Ага, все понятно, раз не здоровиться. Скажи слово паляниця.
Say palanitya. So, okay, pause there. Thank you. So, just on the basis of that one word, that soldier is going to decide whether the stranger in the mist is Russian or not. Because the Russians don't do the palatalization of the tye, apparently. Next slide, please.
We use language a lot to make in-group and out-group distinctions, like Heidi was just talking about. This use of language to make in-group versus out-group has driven a lot of language policy in the United States throughout US history. One of the most awful examples of this is Indian boarding schools, as were mentioned in the Message for All Ages. Indian boarding schools ran from the 1880s to the 1970s. Children were forcibly taken against their parents' will and put in these schools where they were abused and punished if they spoke their own languages. Many of these children did not speak anything but their own languages when they were brought to the schools. There have actually been English-only movements throughout US history at various times. For example, also during World War I, the use of German in public was forbidden. You could still speak German in the privacy of your own home, but otherwise you couldn't. And that was at a time when there were still quite a few native German speakers in the country. It's kind of gone off and on depending on patterns of immigration and war as to how much English-only we get. There have been English-only measures on the ballot here in Arizona a couple of times within the last 20-some years. So watch out for those. Yeah. It's especially ironic that the Indian boarding schools were happening at the same time as our government was also making use of Native American languages for Navajo code talkers. And although the Navajo are the most famous, there were also other Native American languages used for code talking, both in World War I and World War II. So this contrast between we're going to steal your children and abuse them for speaking their own languages, but at the same time, please use your language to come help us win our war. Next slide, please. It's not quite as extreme as what happened with the boarding schools, but there have also been a lot of cases where the bias against Spanish has been very harmful. I found several just recent cases from 1995 to 2015 of judges threatening to take children away from parents if the parents continued to speak Spanish with the child. Judges actually defining speaking Spanish to a child as child abuse. The first quote here, sorry, I'm going to have to turn around here. The first quote here from a judge in 1995 said, "Now get this straight. You start speaking English to this child, because if she doesn't do good in school, then I can remove her, because it's not in her best interest to be ignorant. The child will only hear English." There's so many things wrong with that statement, linguistically and otherwise, I don't even want to start. Yeah, that order in particular actually was rescinded, but I think the damage was done, and it's not the only case. Some of these cases that I have up here, some of these cases were where the mother was actually bilingual in Spanish and English and was intentionally speaking Spanish with the child so the child would have access to their heritage language. Others of these cases were cases where the parent did not speak English yet. It's also ironic that while these things are happening, while parents are being punished and potentially their children taken away from them for speaking their native language with them, white, affluent parents at the same time are fighting very hard to get their children into bilingual schools so that their children will have the opportunity to grow up bilingual, sometimes in the same two languages that are being forbidden to these kids we're talking about. Next slide.
This type of in-group, out-group distinction also plays a big role in the American courtroom. Non-prestige dialects of English are devalued in our society, and their speakers face several difficulties when interacting in a courtroom setting. The example I'm going to play from you is from the Trayvon Martin trial, where the white jurors explicitly said they couldn't understand and did not pay attention to this woman's testimony, Rachel Gentile. This woman was on the phone with Trayvon Martin while he was being stalked by Zimmerman and could recount the entire sequence of events that Trayvon shared with her as they were talking. She testified in African American English. And we're just going to play this audio for you. I would like to give a content warning if you remember that trial. This content is probably going to bring up some emotions.
And I'm like, what's going on? So he said he lost him, and then he said he right by his dad. I told him keep running to his daddy's house.
Okay, let me make sure that I understand that. He's saying he's right by his ass, meaning the guy is right by Trayvon?
No, he said he lost the guy.
Okay.
And then he ran from the back.
Right.
He said he lost him.
Okay.
He started walking back again. And I told him to keep running.
So Trayvon said he started walking because he thought he had lost the guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I said, keep running.
Okay.
He said he ain't gonna run. Because he said he right by his father's house.
Okay.
So you can hear there Gentile interacting with the prosecutor, who's she's the witness for. She testified for 6 hours. And as linguistics professor John Rickford said, it's the next best thing to actually having Trayvon Martin on the stand, you can hear that the prosecutor, who she's the witness for, can't really understand a lot of what she says. But she has no trouble understanding what he says. She is bidialectal, he is not. The white jurors in that trial were not bidialectal. They did not understand her. And in comments afterwards, they said, we didn't talk about her testimony one time in 16 hours of deliberation. She didn't come up. So her testimony was completely irrelevant to the outcome of the trial, and yet it contained some of the most vital information that they needed to make their decision. The jurors and many other participants in the court believed that African American English is a defective variety of English. It's some kind of failed attempt to produce mainstream American English and insufficient for complete communication. She should have been the star witness at that trial. What she said should have been the star content of the trial, but it was not because of her language variety. Next slide, please. In fact, this is the message from linguistics for you, all language varieties are fully complete grammatical systems suitable for communicating a wide range or complete range of human thought. That's just how language acquisition works. That's what you're building when you're acquiring your language. I'm going to give you a couple of examples specifically about African American English because it's a particularly stigmatized variety in the United States. So it can be helpful to you to have some armamentarium to show to anybody who's interested that it has its own internal grammatical structure. One famous feature, one familiar feature of African American English is what is often called copula drop, where forms of the verb to be are omitted from a sentence. In fact, this is a rule-governed process. It only applies to the is and are forms of to be. It doesn't apply to am, to was, or to were. You can't drop those forms. And it's not okay in some contexts. And interestingly, it's the same context where mainstream American English forbids what we call contraction. So in mainstream American English, I can say, he is eating apples, but I can also contract that is and say, he's eating apples. That's a legitimate process for my English. In African American English, that's exactly the same context where you can eliminate the copula. You can say, he is eating apples. You also can say, he eating apples. In mainstream American English, contraction is forbidden in certain syntactic contexts. So I can say, I think she is too, meaning I think she is eating apples too. But you will listen to me say the contracted version and recognize that's not a production that you would accept. I think she's too. Can't do contraction in that context. You also can't do copula drop in African American English in exactly that same context. You can't say, I think she too. That's not grammatical. Next slide, please. Besides that phenomenon, there are many other phonological, morphological, syntactic, and semantic differences between African American English and mainstream American English. One interesting difference that is quite salient to speakers of mainstream American English is the use of the actual form be in African American English. African American English has innovated a habitual aspect marker using this form be. So in mainstream American English, these two sentences would both be produced with are. But these two sentences in African American English, one is produced with be and one leaves it out, and they mean something completely different. So they in the house, that's copula drop, that's is missing. It means the same, or are, in fact, in this case. It means the same thing as they are in the house right now. It's present tense. If an African American English speaker says they be in the house, that means they are habitually in the house. They're usually in the house. And so it says something completely different in terms of a factual content as they in the house. Most mainstream American English speakers are not sensitive to this difference. Sounds like they just threw in a be, or they mean they're saying the same thing. These are synonymous sentences, but they are not. So you can imagine how that could have an impact in a trial. Somebody says they're usually in the house versus they are in the house right now. That's two different important statements about a timeline. A study showed that Philadelphia court reporters who have to be 95% accurate in their transcription of mainstream American English in order to get the job can only transcribe African American English at an accuracy rate of 60%. And when asked to paraphrase African American English in mainstream American English, like to translate it, they were accurate at 33%. Court reporters are the people who form the official record of a trial. Their content is crucial to the outcomes and verdicts that are rendered. So this discrepancy between their mostly right mastery of mainstream American English and their mastery of African American English is extremely important to trial outcomes in Philadelphia and everywhere else in the United States. I forgot to comment on this last one. This is one of the sentences from the study. Court reporters heard the audio, "He don't be in that neighborhood," spoken in African American English, not the way I'm saying it. And one reporter produced, "We are going to be in this neighborhood," as the transcription of "He don't be in that neighborhood," which is, among other differences, the opposite.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Most of us are pretty aware that we shouldn't judge Black people negatively for speaking African American English. Most of us have learned over the years, although we might as children in school have learned that that was bad English, somehow we've learned over the years that Black people speak African American English because it is part of their community and their culture and that it's just fine. Sometimes we might still have an emotional reaction when we hear African American English. When you heard the clip of Rachel Chantel testifying, did you maybe have some feelings about that? When I've played clips in class, I can tell that my class has emotional reactions to hearing African American English. Especially if we hear somebody use the word axe for ask, that one is especially stigmatized. I've had a UU friend ask me, why is it okay for people to say axe? But they were learning that it was okay. Even if we're aware that we shouldn't judge African American English negatively, sometimes we might think it's okay to judge other stigmatized dialects negatively. We might think it's okay to judge conservative white people's dialects negatively. So in fact, I found signs, I found liberal sites that made fun of conservatives for English errors or dialectal differences on protest signs. There are hundreds of these, with many liberals ready to make fun of them. The one on the left here, the picture on the left here, this one is a dialectal difference. That spelling borer for borrower probably reflects Southern white English. That's probably how the word borrower is pronounced in that person's dialect. The one on the right, yeah, someone else can pronounce it better than I can. The one on the right is just a spelling error. This person probably says official, and they just had trouble spelling it. These are different things. One is representing a problem, a difference of dialect, a speaker of probably Southern white English, and one is representing trouble with standardized spelling. Okay, and prejudice against dialect is one of the few remaining socially acceptable prejudices. Many people think it's totally fine to make fun of those kinds of English on those signs. There's two things to keep in mind here. First of all, there's nothing wrong with speaking Southern white English or some other stigmatized dialect. Just as there is nothing wrong with speaking African American English, all dialects are equally good at conveying information and doing all the things we do with language. But the sign I showed you on the right with the misspelling where it wasn't a dialect difference, Ability to spell in what's considered correct spelling reflects formal education. Access to formal education in this country is not equal. So when people make fun of these conservatives with their signs with spellings or dialect differences, it's classism in disguise. It's really just classism in disguise. Yeah. So even though making fun of non-standard dialects is still considered socially acceptable a lot of the time, whereas making fun of race is not, both of them are making fun of somebody for being an out group. When you want to criticize someone's protest signs, criticize their content, criticize their political arguments. Don't criticize the dialect they write it in or their inability to reach official spellings, correct spellings. There's actually quite a few people who take pride in being what they call a grammar Nazi. Don't base your self-worth on having succeeded at the formal education to be able to spell English the way the dictionary has it. And don't base your self-worth on speaking a dialect that has prestige to it. So, yeah, being a grammar Nazi is not a good thing. Next slide. Another group whose language often gets criticized is young women's speech. Some features that are often claimed to be common in young women's speech are uptalk, going up with your pitch even when it's not a question. Using like a whole lot, especially to introduce quotations. And creaky voice, which is sometimes also called vocal fry. And just before you hear the clip, so you know what you're listening for, creaky voice sounds like, that's creak. I have a clip here of a young woman using these three features.
Asked me the other day and I was like, no.
Yeah, so she got all three of those into 3 seconds. It's not just young women who do this, although it may be more common in young women's speech. Young men do it, older people do it. I use like a lot, so does Heidi. Okay. Somehow, it's usually young women whose speech patterns are getting picked on. Maybe that's not a surprise in our society either. In fact, linguists have found that women typically lead sound changes. Women are typically on the foredge of changes in language. And young people, of course, also lead sound changes. So it should be no surprise if young women are using features that sound different or unusual to the rest of us. Other language changes, besides the ones that we notice in young female speech maybe, also sometimes get people upset. There's some changes that have happened just recently in English. So now you can say things like, "'cause computers." Yeah, usually it expresses frustration. You didn't used to be able to put because followed by a noun. That's a new construction. You can also say adjective followed by much to indicate maybe irony. Hypocritical much? That's a recent change. That didn't used to exist. Sometimes people hear these and they go, oh, that's cute. And sometimes they hear them and go, you can't say that. That's not right. One that often gets people upset is the use of literally to mean not literally, to mean metaphorically. So one time I was walking across campus and overheard a young woman on her phone talking to a friend about a particularly surprising or amusing event, saying, I was literally physically dying. Now, since she was still there to relate the event, she obviously wasn't. What's going on here is that intensifiers like literally change very often in language. And the reason is they quickly become not intensive enough, and then you need a new intensifier. So this is normal language change. Languages change, it's normal, all living languages change. The only way to keep a language from changing is to kill it by forbidding anybody from speaking it. But it's also normal to feel upset about language change because it means you're not part of the cool young in group anymore. Right, yeah. So language change is normal. Next slide. One more issue that I think we all know that we should be used to or get used to, but some of us may have had trouble with, is using they as a singular non-gendered pronoun. Now, maybe most of us are sitting here going, oh yeah, I'm used to that, that's okay. I have had UU friends, although not people who were here at this church. I've had several UU friends tell me, they is plural. It's bad grammar. You can't do that. I know what good grammar is. So this is not an issue that we're done with, I think. Using they and them as someone's pronouns, because those are the pronouns they want to be referred to by, sometimes takes us some effort. I have someone in my life who uses they, them pronouns, and it takes me some effort. It is worth making this effort to respect a person's identity. If you heard someone say, I just saw Jenny, they're going back to school this semester. Now, if you didn't know that Jenny uses they, them pronouns, that might take you a second. If you did know that Jenny uses they, them pronouns, you might go, oh, okay, yeah, got the right pronouns, good. But it might take you a little extra processing. But in fact, we're all used to singular they. We all have no problem whatsoever with singular they. When we hear it in contexts like, oh, somebody lost their wallet, I hope they find it. They'll have a really hard time if they don't come back and get their wallet. How many tokens of singular they did I just stick into that one little bit? Not a problem, right? Singular they has been around at least since Shakespeare, who wrote, there's not a man I meet but doth salute me, as if I were their well-acquainted friend. That's a singular they, a man. And I found this nice example on Reddit, where someone is talking about pregnancy and switching back and forth between she and they. Abortion wouldn't be the first thing I'd suggest if she asked for help, but if that's what they wanted to do, I wouldn't try to convince them otherwise. So clearly both of those work. Okay, what's going on here is that singular they is not new, but singular they is new when it's used to refer to a specific, definite, known person. And that's what some of us have found takes extra work to get used to. Singular they has already been in the language a long time to refer to people in general, a person in general who is not specified.
So to summarize the message we are bringing to you from linguistics this morning, you're making judgments about identity all the time based on people's language. It's a major part of what we do with language. Our job as UUs is to notice yourself, noticing out-group dialect features. And if you're having an emotional reaction to those features, just step back from it for a moment. Just be aware of it. Don't let anything about that control your way that you're interacting with that person. Or you could react like a linguist reacts and go, how neat. Language ideologies, prescriptivisms, are feelings of being right, often based on what we learn about language in our educational system, is in fact one way that we implement structural racism. Be proud of your mastery of spelling. I certainly am proud of mine. Be proud of your mastery of academic English or formal English. Those are achievements, and it takes work to do them. But do not think badly of anybody who hasn't mastered those registers. This message ties into UU principles, particularly 1, 2, and 8. We as UUs recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and speech is an expression of personhood. So we want to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of each accent, dialect, and language that you run into. Thanks very much.
Test. Would you please respond in song by standing, and the words to hymn 23, Bring Many Names, will appear on the slide in a moment, and we'll sing 4 verses of this, the first, fourth, fifth, and first again, if you care. Bring many names, beautiful and good, celebrate in parable and story, holy
Isn't it nice to be able to sing together once again? Closing words for this morning come from the Reverend Darcy Roque. There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There's too much injustice in this world to not find the right balance every day. There's too much pain in this world not to heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world, so let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence, and do that every day. It's time now to extinguish our chalice. Let's read these familiar words. There we go. By Deborah Burrell. We have basked in the warmth and beauty of this flame and this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry its glow within, but let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond. Thank you, Natasha. Hung Yu, our postlude.